Welcome to the Climate Risk Reduction, a showcase of Bay Area solutions. I'm Annie Burke, and I'm really glad that you're all here. This is the second of 3 online showcases. Last week, we traveled to the North Bay to learn about projects happening up there around climate solutions. And next week, same time, we'll be heading to the South Bay. So today we're here in the Central Bay. And as I said, I'm Annie Burke. I'm the executive director of Together Bay Area. And also, I was born and raised here in the East Bay. I love how you can bike or ride, hike deep in a redwood forest and not be too far from downtown Oakland or another city. I love that you can eat delicious Vietnamese food on Clement Street in San Francisco and then go walk the Tree Fall by Andy Goldsworthy in the Presidio. And I love that the East Bay is full of these amazing connections between the natural world and our urban environments. And I love that we call this place home, and maybe that's similar to you too. So as we gather and as we get started on our showcase for climate solutions today, I invite you to take a breath and arrive here. Let's all get grounded. Wherever you are, everywhere that we are, the land we're on is Indigenous land. Together Bay Area and our members are actively engaged in a lot of work, heart work and mind work, to go beyond land acknowledgements. And if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing in that way, I invite you to check out our Right Relations program that we have co-designed and co-led with the Redbud Resource Group. And I also invite you to check out the program from last year's, or I guess it's this year's, from the 2024 Together Conference. And we'll drop both those links in the chat, give you a sense of what we're doing here at Together Bay Area to go beyond land acknowledgements and also acknowledging that we're here on Indigenous land. So we're here today to learn and get inspired. And let me tell you just a little bit about Together Bay Area. Together Bay Area is a regional coalition of organizations, and that includes nonprofits, businesses, local agencies, tribes, tribal organizations, who are all working for healthy lands, people, and communities. We're doing a lot of things to make the Bay Area even healthier and better than it has been in the past, leaving it better than we found it. And there are a lot of folks here today who work for our member organizations, and I see you there and the participants, and I'm really glad that you're all here. So thank you. One of the things that we're working on as a coalition is supporting Proposition 4. Prop 4 is a bond measure that we are voting on now. We all have, I think we all should have our mail-in ballots by now. And if you go into the polls on November 5th, you can vote on it then too. It's a $10 billion climate bond that tackles our most urgent climate needs today before the damage becomes too costly and unmanageable. Prop 4 includes almost $1 billion for the State Coastal Conservancy. And the State Coastal Conservancy, if you aren't aware of them, is a really critical funding agency and partner to so many local organizations here in the Bay Area and up and down the state. Here in the Bay Area, I don't think you can drive or travel for more than 30 minutes in any direction in the Bay Area and not see some kind of work that has been done with State Coastal Conservancy funding and partnership. They have been involved in so many places and spaces that have been conserved, improved, and stewarded for the benefit of all of us. So a really critical partner. So if Prop 4 is passed, it will make a huge difference here in the Bay Area. From dealing with extreme heat, which we just all experienced recently, to catastrophic fires, clean drinking water for all Californians, and more. There's a lot of work that will happen on the ground across the region if Prop 4 passes. So today we're showcasing some of our members' projects to bring Prop 4 to life for you. So we invite you to sit back and relax and enjoy a showcase of solutions. We invite you to listen, take notes, and ask questions in the chat to soak in some of the good work that's happening and feel the inspiration. Leading our conversation today will be my colleague, Jessica Little. She has decades of experience in working in policy and advocacy in Sacramento. And I believe that even though she's raising her family in Sacramento and she loves it there and she's a Kings fan, I think her heart's really here in the Bay Area. And it's a pleasure to introduce Jess.
I'm going to put my serious face back on. And yes, I am a Kings fan, but you should know that I do have a deep connection to the Bay Area as well. I was born there, and many of my formative years were spent in all sorts of places in the Bay Area. It's where my interest about water and animals was piqued through different activities, mostly in the Bay Delta, but also all throughout the different counties in the Bay Area. So I'm really glad to be here today, but that's enough about me. There's so many cool projects to learn about and to talk about with our guests. So again, we're here to talk about these projects and how our region could benefit from Proposition 4, the $10 billion climate bond that Annie mentioned. One of the coolest things that Together Bay Area has done, or kind of internally most inspiring things we've done, is ask all of the members and member partners about their projects so we could understand really the regional need. In the most recent data we got from partners, which was last fall, we heard about over 150 projects in all 10 counties of the Bay Area, including Santa Cruz County, for a total of $1.2 billion in project need. So what was really interesting about that is two things. It's both need for capital projects that go in the ground, but it's also need for ongoing care of lands, programming, getting people to these places that we love and care about so much. So you can learn more about some of those projects. I'll share a link later in the webinar. But enough about me and all of those projects. We are going to move to Alameda County. Can I welcome Courtney Coon to the stage? Courtney Coon is the project manager at Alameda County Resource Conservation District. She has a PhD in wildlife ecology and has a master's of public health. So she's well studied. And I also have the distinct pleasure of working with Courtney in a variety of places. You might ask her if you see her on the side about sustainable agricultural lands conservation. She knows a few things about that as well. But we're here to learn more about wildlife connectivity. So I am turning it over to you, Courtney.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jess. And thank you to Together Bay Area for hosting this. And thanks everyone for being here on your lunch hour with us. I'm welcoming you on behalf of our project team, which includes Alameda County Resource Conservation District. We call ourselves ACRCD for short. Mark Thomas and Dudek. I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit about our East Bay Wildlife Connectivity Project today. So I want to start with a story that was recently in the news. Maybe some of you saw this. A hiker in Pleasanton Ridge captured a video of this mama mountain lion with her 3 cute little cubs. For those that aren't familiar, this blue arrow here indicates approximately where this video was taken. And you may already know this, but mountain lions have really stable but large territories, ideally about 100 square miles at least, and that's not overlapping. So when it comes time for these 3 puma siblings to find their own territories away from their mom, they'll almost certainly have to cross a major highway in the Bay Area. Highways are a major barrier for natural wildlife movement, not just here, but all over the US and across the globe. Maybe that makes you think about the Wallace-Annenberg crossing that they're building over Highway 101 now down in Southern California. And pumas aren't the only species that have to contend with crossing major highways. The Diablo Range and the East Bay Hills are critical habitats for lots of sensitive and important wildlife species, pond turtles, red-legged frogs, deer, bobcat, and we're starting to see the return of elk to this region, which is really exciting. But we know that these highways are important for people to use too, right? These highways are used by millions of people each year. But when wildlife end up on roads, it can lead to animal strikes, and that is not good for anyone. We see a lot of human death and wildlife deaths as well. And besides typical movements of wildlife, we need to prepare for large-scale shifts in habitat. This model shows present-day landscape and changes that are going to happen just in the next 25 to 30 years when we're experiencing an average of 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit increase in temperature. Shifts in habitat mean we're going to have wildlife climate refugees that are seeking out more suitable places to live. And highways will almost certainly act as important barriers as animals seek refuge either farther north or into higher latitudes. And we think, here, can you change the slide? We think the solution that will address highways as barriers is a holistic network of wildlife crossing structures. And by that, I mean lots of different types of structures in different places for different species. Because a pond turtle is going to need a different type of crossing in a different location and a different frequency of those crossings than, say, a mountain lion would, who can range much farther and has different preferences about how and when it moves. The good news is that structures already exist underneath many of our highways, often just by accident. They have been built as drainages or for moving cattle, for example. But others like this one under I-580 in Doolin Canyon, that's between Dublin and Livermore, they need to be retrofitted or modified in some way, such as through unblocking of a structure or adding fences to keep animals off the road and funnel them into specific areas, and that will make them more attractive to wildlife. And we have to think about more than just making sure a structure is physically usable. Here's an example of a coyote who's approaching an under highway structure. If you listen closely, you can hear a car approaching, and that scares the coyote off from the structure. So we need to start thinking about sound and light from roads as barriers as well, and find ways to mitigate those issues at current structures. Of course, there are lots of places along highways where a crossing is really needed and not currently available. In those cases, we might want to consider building something new. This is one that is a rendering of a crossing that's going to be built in Pacheco Pass on 152, and it's designed by our project partners, Mark Thomas. Very nice looking structure, so we hope we can have some of those added as well. Our specific project is looking at I-580, I-680, and 84 in Alameda County. We're looking at current potential crossing structures and future potential crossing structures in this study region. The groundwork for this project started in 2018 with the initiation of some data collection by ACRCD and our collaborators at the UC Davis Road Ecology Center, who I think might be online with us today. A number of other state agencies were also collecting data in the region and thinking about highways and where priority barriers might exist. And we leveraged that combined data to write some grants, and it took some time and effort, but we did it. We got some funding, and that's where we are today in our phase 1 of our project. So, in last year, we got a grant from the Wildlife Conservation Board to do 3 main things. One is to develop a highway permeability plan, so thinking about what's already there and how we can retrofit. To design 3 new shovel-ready crossing structures, and to start building multi-agency, multi-organizational relationships, which is really in the vein of Together Bay Area, really coming together and thinking about how we can collaborate. So that's what we're working on through 2027. After that, we'll move on to phase 2 of our project, which is the pre-construction phase. And this is full of a lot of unseen but really expensive bits of the project. So these are things like moving utilities, acquiring titles and easements on the land adjacent to where we want to build new crossings, marketing and public outreach. So a lot of this time will also be spent fundraising for those things, as well as for phase 3 of the project. We hope that during this time period, we'll also be starting to work on retrofitting some of those other existing structures as well. And then we're hoping by 2030, we'll be moving into phase 3 of this project, which is construction of these new structures. Of course, different structures are likely to be on different timelines because of funding priorities. And that really brings me to the fact that we do not have set funding for phases 2 and 3 of this project. And we think that they would be really great fits for Prop 4 funding. Prop 4 funding would really be a game changer here and make this process go much faster. Because we aren't the only organizations that are working on wildlife crossing structures and starting to plan for them. There are several in the Bay Area and even more throughout the state. And we're all going to be starting to look for funding to build these really expensive or potentially expensive structures in the next 5 to 10 years, which means that there might be competition. Whereas if we have Prop 4 funding, there might be a lot less of that. And that'll make everything go quicker, and we'll have much better regional connectivity for wildlife on a shorter time frame. Okay, so I glossed over a lot of important details, probably that some of you are curious about. And if you want to learn more, we actually have an online informational webinar on Tuesday, October 10th to October 29th at 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. Sorry about that, 9 a.m. And you can also sign up for email updates on our project website. I hope to see some of you there. This QR code that's off to this side will bring you directly to our website where you can sign up for updates or the webinar. And I think we're also dropping some links in the chat as well, so that you can go directly to those pages. And then that just brings me to thank you all, and I hope you have a great day. If you have specific questions that don't get answered today, please feel free to reach out. This is our email address. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Courtney. That was, as you could probably tell by my giggles and my expressions, I forgot I was on mute, but I love the videos of the mama and the baby cats. They're very compelling. What is that term? Charismatic megafauna. They really make you feel attached to the project. And one more personal note I'll share. Many of my colleagues could attest to the fact that on vacation recently, traveling from California all the way to Yellowstone, I was blown away by all the wildlife connectivity structures through the whole stretch, and videotaped at least 5 of them and sent them as a way of saying, like, I hope that California and the Bay Area can really like replicate some of these things here. So right on. I'm so excited to see some of this work move forward. We will have a chance to ask questions of Courtney and our other guest speakers after we hear from our friends at the field semester. Can I bring our friends from the field semester onto the stage? So we have 3 speakers here today. We have Yair Heber. He is the lead founder of the field semester, which I would like him to tell you a bit of what that is. Leslie Allen, who is a biologist and regulatory permitting specialist at WRA, and Brent Bucknam, who is the founder of Hyphy Design Lab and Restoration Design. He's also a environmental semester school alumni. So welcome to the virtual stage. Don't have too much fun. Just teasing. All right, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jess, for having us, and thanks, Courtney, for sharing about the program and project you all are working on. Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the field semester, about what we're working on, and our sort of our engagement approach to watershed regeneration. So on the next slide, we are going to go over to little town of Port Costa. And you're seeing in the picture here, the sort of looking southwest over the Carquinez Strait down into that steep ravine, that watershed. And yeah, I want to sort of pitch the idea here that this is a relatively small town or a small project scope area, but it's sort of a smaller version of a much bigger story. Right, we have a small human development in a big, beautiful watershed, human population residing within, sort of bigger, expansive natural area and natural system. And, here, as in very many other places throughout California that are similarly positioned, what we basically have is that the watershed was actually really severely altered many years ago in a way that has had really lasting and vast consequences to both the human and non-human population that reside within this watershed. And so the big question that we're looking at is, how does the environmental regeneration that's needed in spaces like this get done? And so in the next slide, we're going to look way back. This is as old of a picture as I could find, that really shows sort of how severe this industrially motivated environmental alteration was. And so you can see right away sort of these obvious signs of change to the watershed. You can see apparent in this photo, two really big dams that were put up, and you can see the reservoir that's still there today. And that dam was actually already 50 years old in this photo. This dam was built in 1890. And back to our theme of little version of a big story, this dam happened to have been built by Michael O'Shaughnessy, who's pretty well known for significantly larger projects than the small dam he built in Port Costa. And if you look at what this looks like today on the next slide, the sort of reservoir looks beautiful. But if you compare that to the photos from when it was made, you can really see how sort of radical of a shift this was to the landscape, how much of a intrusion, and it sort of sets off this chain of events of really severe lasting changes to the watershed. And so what does all this look like, really kind of 150 years later, underneath some of the greenery that's popped up around it? We see on the next slide, we see, very severe hydrological impact. We have a ton of sedimentation. This is the sort of water in the reservoir after some rain, really intense head cutting in the land, tons of erosion. And in the next slide, probably the most, kind of like visceral for the human community is just really intense flooding that happens. This is down towards the end of the watershed, the main street in Port Costa during big storm events. And so the question, you can switch to the next slide. That question that we're getting back to is who needs to solve these sort of problems that we've inherited, right? Who bears the responsibility for the environmental health of these spaces? What does fixing it look like? And how do we know what should be done to regenerate 150 years of mismanagement? And I think, perhaps most importantly, or where the buck stops is, and who can afford to do that. So on the next slide, I'll tell you about our approach to this problem. And, our approach is basically rooted in education. And our idea in this case, in this particular watershed, is to make a semester-long experience for students to really immerse them in this task, right? To bring a cohort of students to come to live in this watershed for a full semester, where the campus itself is essentially the core student project, right? Is like the focal point of their learning. We think similarly to other very complicated problems that these types of projects present a really wide array of learning opportunities. And, you know, for these young people, we are after all, we are trying to equip them with the skill sets and sensibilities that they need to solve the world's current problems. And so sort of what better way than to actually immerse them into sort of laboratories of the problems themselves. And, you know, again, small story, small version of a much bigger story. And so the watershed here presents what's perhaps a more approachably sized task that can then teach us lessons that we can take elsewhere throughout the state. And all that being said, even with our sort of educational approach that is able to leverage, attract resources, bring community investment, bring experts, two of whom you're about to hear from, to the effort, and also, of course, brings with it a set workforce. Kind of even with all this going for it, and even at this relatively small and more tangible scale, right? We're not trying to address Hetch Hetchy here. We're just trying to address the small dam and the small watershed. Even with all that, it's really a remarkably heavy lift to do this kind of work and do it thoughtfully and sustainably. And so I'm going to hand the microphone over to Brent from Hyphae, who is going to give us a little bit of a peek behind the technical curtain here, and show you all kind of what is the work that really needs to get done, and really how heavy of a lift this type of watershed regeneration really is.
Hey, how's everyone going? Good to meet you all. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm used to about 200 slides in 5 minutes, so I've used extreme constraint here with about 3 or 4 slides, which hopefully will convey some of it. But anyone who's interested, more than happy to get into more detail. So just to give a little context, Yair found us. We are Hyphae Design Laboratory. We're an interdisciplinary ecological design and engineering firm in Oakland. And I think one of the reasons that Yair found us is because I actually went to a semester program quite like this in Vermont when I was 16 years old. And it has then, set me on a course for the rest of my life to have a mission-driven ecological design firm. So if we can imagine what it did to one or many people in my program, I think we could also hopefully do that in the Bay Area. Really, breed a whole multi-generational ecological restoration workforce. So Yair presented all the problems, and I guess I'm now supposed to present the solutions, which is not an easy task. But I think one of the really exciting things for us was this opportunity to think on a longer term scale. A lot of times when we're doing design projects, even restoration projects, we have to think about like, when is it done and when is construction over? And for us, one of the goals was to imagine it like long into the future, and also to sort of have some restraint with the design, so that ultimately the students will be involved in both some of the design and restoration over time. But nonetheless, we have to do a lot of permitting and get the project started. And so our approach was to dream big. I think what we wanted to do was look at not just how do we minimize impact on a single project site. Often you're dealing with either a really urban condition or a really rural greenfield condition. Here we're sort of in this weird mix. It's this urban and rural, like very kind of impacted post-industrial site, but also there's very like clear upstream and downstream impacts, and a lot of flooding, as Yair said. So we wanted to dream big to say, how can our site hopefully and the students' work over time impact the watershed? So we set goals to say, like, how do we actually maximize water storage capacity on site, both through ecological bioretention strategies, as well as improvements to the former dam. We're also then looking at just sort of traditional stream restoration goals of like, how do we slow the velocity of water moving through this thing? How do we flatten grades, create more meanders, create more floodplains in a very narrow and tense site? So we're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. And then a lot of our goals are, how do we mitigate sediment? The big challenge on this site is there's a dam that used to be 40 feet deep, and it's now about 6 to 8 feet deep. And so that is all sediment that has flowed down from upstream through poor land management. So these are all kind of interwoven elements. If you go to the next slide, what our goal was from the outset, knowing that this design wasn't just needing to be a good design, but also ultimately sculpt a curriculum for students. is we set out to really bring together a diverse group of folks, including Leslie from WRA, who you'll hear from, and, you know, bring these, you know, environmental planners, wetland biologists, foresters, hydrologists to the table at the beginning of the project. And we started to do some really innovative work of stormwater modeling, HEC-RES modeling. We brought in tree and wetland biologists to like help us actually drive the design. We also did more innovative sort of scanning work by capturing LiDAR scanning, for example, throughout the property, so we know exactly where every tree is. And you know, we've been using this sort of high tech and low tech approach as sort of two benchmarks for the project. If you hop to the next slide, I can show you some of our high level goals. So as I was saying, there's a lot of run onto this property from upstream as well as from all of these roads that surround it in a pretty intense narrow site. And then there's tons of downstream flooding in the community. And what we wanted to look at was all these impacts. And if you flip to the next site, how do we go from a site that's become very eroded and filled with sediment to actually ideally triple its capacity to hold and store water, both through like improving the habitat in the pond as well as doing biological retention upstream. And if you go to the next slide, I think our real goal on this project is to look at restoration strategies also that students can implement, right? In a lot of cases, we look at like large scale strategies that might improve the site the most, but here we're both looking at a range of larger moves like dredging some of the pond ultimately in the future to create better habitat, better storage, some larger moves in restoration along the creek, but ultimately a lot of moves that the students can do that are, you know, by hand, that they can see the iteration of this happen over decades. If you go to the last slide I have, I think for us, the big goal is really like everything from the buildings that are going to be built there, like the cabins for these kids to stay in, to all of the restoration work, like how are the students actually involved in seeing like the before, during, and after? How do they learn the design and engineering skills, and then the implementation skills to actually build and make these changes? So I think that's it. I'll hand it over to Leslie, and obviously more than happy to answer questions and talk to people afterwards.
Thank you, Brent.
Thanks, Brent. Next slide, please. So I'm leading a team that's helping with Brent's ecological design and keeping the field semester in compliance with federal and state environmental regulations. Like other speakers you've heard from today and in prior sessions, I've been doing this kind of work in the Bay Area for years, and I've seen that one of the biggest challenges for successful habitat restoration is ensuring consistent and long-term stewardship of those restored lands after people like us who get them built aren't involved anymore. Another challenge these kinds of projects are facing today, many of you probably relate, it's a real shortage of skilled laborers and technical specialists who can do the vast quantity of work that needs to be done to design, build, and maintain them properly. So what excites me most about the field semester is not that it's a feel-good watershed restoration project, which it is, but the fact that it's going to create the place and the vision for developing multiple generations of environmental stewards. Next slide. And as Yair and Brent were describing, the school will be based on the land, and the curriculum will ensure that the watershed's resiliency will be monitored and managed. So unlike many other projects, the field semester will have built-in immediate and long-term stewardship on site in residence. It's pretty exciting. And through that structure and those hands-on experiences, ideally we'll be inspiring young people to go on from there to pursue the jobs, degrees, careers, creative pursuits, or spiritual paths that are needed for Bay Area communities and habitats to stay resilient as climate changes. So I hope you all will help spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I just want to do a really formal and scientific poll real quick. If you're watching and you have access to your raised your hand feature, Can you please raise your hand if you had a formative experience on the land, wherever you were at the time that brought you to this career path or to this webinar? I'm looking at participant list to see if anybody is raising their hands. Oh, yeah. Well, I can just already say quickly that this very scientific poll points to those moments in connection with the land as a way to steward, as a way to build new ecological stewards. So this project is super exciting for so many reasons. You all shared different ones, but building a workforce and building connection with the land to steward the environment of the Bay Area for so many generations is so important. And yeah, I also love seeing all the hands up. At Together Bay Area, we and through these different showcases, we've seen a theme of living with very developed, degraded, altered environments. And we have so many creative practitioners and Together Bay Area members that are doing amazing work within, sort of the space that we're living in to repair our relationship with the land and reconnect with the people of the land. So thank you so much for sharing all of those projects. And before we move into question and answers, I want to share that, and we had intended to have an additional speaker. We were going to have Adriana Guerrero Nardone from Salted Roots come and talk about Pacifica Water Quality Campaign. And unfortunately, they're not able to be here today. So later in the presentation, we will have some links for you to go check out the work that Salted Roots is doing to connect people to the ocean through surfing. Okay, let's see. I also wanted to add one more note about Proposition 4. There's a lot of opportunity here to connect the projects you heard about today with the bond if it is successful. And while we would all like for checks to just arrive on our doorsteps from Proposition 4, if it passes, there's still going to be a little bit more work to do. So again, if the bond does pass, there will be work. Well, we being all of your organizations who are working on awesome projects, will need to go and find the funding at the agencies that it would be appropriated to. And that work would start soon through relationship building, and the earliest money would be expected to flow from Proposition 4 would be sometime next summer. So it doesn't just stop on November 5th. If the bond does pass on November 5th, just get your engines revving to bring funding into the region. Are we ready for some question and answers? Is everybody pinned back up on stage? Okay, awesome. I do see a couple hands up. I'm wondering if those are remnant hands from my very scientific poll or if there are questions with those hands raised. While we're sorting that out, I'm going to ask a question of our guests. And maybe it's a softball. I don't know. First question, I am going to ask you each to answer this, if this is okay. What is one thing you wish the general public knew about the work you're doing and how you're doing it? Maybe one new thing. Courtney or Yair, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think I touched on this in our talk, but just how much like work has already gone into the project to make it a project. And then how much more we have to do. So this is like a 15-year long project that a lot of people are very invested in, and we're continuing to build relationships, and how important that those relationships and working with lots of different organizations and the general public is going to be to this project.
Relationships are at the heart of so much of this work. Absolutely. Yair?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just say, and I tried to underscore it a little bit in what I said before, but the the amount of different perspectives that need to be brought together to make a really good, serviceable, viable, sustainable plan for a watershed, in a community, even at this scale, is just wild. I mean, there are so many, and I'm more of a kind of generalist person. I know just a little bit about a lot of stuff, and the amount of like very, very well trained myopic specialists that sort of we've been able to rope in one way or another to working on this project has been truly inspiring, but also a little bit intimidating, honestly, that it's like you really need to do a thorough job. You need to find all of these really, really expert folks. An expert does not necessarily just mean, like PhD in some niche of biology, but just a lot of very different perspectives that can help you put together a really good plan. So it's been really fun and inspiring for me, sort of sitting in the middle, to get to meet all these people and hear so many different perspectives. But also, I think, just indicative of that need for all of this type of work we're doing wherever it happens. It's like we have to be able to support all of these different folks coming together to help with the planning and thinking.
I can add on to that. 'Cause I think one thing I would like people to know about the work that I do, particularly when it comes to environmental regulations and compliance with those regulations and engaging with the agencies that are involved in that, is I would like people to know that the agency staff are also people and also workers and also specialists, and they tend to be underfunded and understaffed. So a big part of what we do, working with projects like the field semester, is making sure that we're translating all the technical information in the best way possible to streamline it for the agency staff so that they can help get the projects through the process without compromising what they need to do. So that's very much a behind the scenes step that happens, and it takes a lot of effort.
To follow up on what Leslie was saying, I think one of the interesting challenges for designers or engineers is also trying to solve enough of the problems to get things permitted, but not solve all the problems, so that we can leave opportunities for the students, and to really try to think on that adaptive management long-term timescale to say well, what do we really need to do to get open? But then how do we still dream big about further ambitions, right? Because a few of the goals that we want to do around sort of large scale watershed management aren't necessarily fundable by a school, and nor do they need to be in the first few years to get kids out there. But, we're trying to think on that 5, 10, 20-year timeline where it's okay, maybe this ambition we have doesn't need to happen for 20 years, and that's okay. And so I think trying to think about both how to do that from a design standpoint and have restraint, and then also from a permitting standpoint and allow a lot of phasing, but then sort of get through the permits, and then similarly through a funding approach. So I would say I'm also somewhat like Yair in that I specialize in being a generalist, but I also know that we really need to bring a lot of the specialists together. And I think if nothing else, our goal has been to just try to bring them to the table early so that they can drive the design and the narrative, rather than sort of the, bring all the ologists in at the end and try to post-rationalize some design. Is a lot of how environmental impact reporting happens, but with an ecologically driven goal, it's really to have that be sculpting everything.
I love this perspective. Just kind of pulling in from the conference Together Bay Area hosted earlier this year, one thing we talked a lot about at the conference was sort of the perspective of 100 years. So looking to create a vision 100 years from now that is awesome, gives us the opportunity to bring in multiple generations, so different types of creativity and opportunities for learning and adapting, and also getting permits done. But I love the timeline of what can we do now that gets us towards some 100-year awesome vision. 100 years is you can pick any sort of longer term horizon, but I love the creativity and the opportunity to build relationships that longer timeline gives us. So I have a couple more fun questions, but first I want to get to a question that is in the chat. And Allison is asking, Are all of your organizations working on building relationships with area wildlife rescue / rehab organizations? They say they are a longtime volunteer with Lindsay Wildlife. Does anybody want to take that?
We're collaborating with the Oakland Zoo, who does do some of that rehabilitation, specifically on some endangered species. So yeah, we're starting to branch out and work with those types of groups.
Awesome.
I would say we have not explicitly, other than the formative experience of Sulphur Creek and Lindsay and all those places on my own childhood. But we, for many reasons, we are like very, very open and proactive about trying to make as many connections with organizations doing related work, both to be able to expose future students to all the amazing, cool things you can do if you have these interests, and kind of try to help funnel them into internships, volunteer, future careers. But also, yeah, to be able to potentially collaborate with, projects when we have kids there. So we are always wanting to hear from folks, and a lot of organizations also already have students that have been volunteering with them, and like, oh, this could be such a cool kind of big culminating experience for someone during their high school years who's already been volunteering at Lindsay since they were 9 or 10. So we are very eager to connect and build relationships with whoever around here is doing good work.
Thank you. Awesome. Feel free to drop any other questions in the chat that are coming up for you all. This question is maybe for all of you. How can people get involved in the work that you're doing? And what would you recommend that folks read or listen to learn more? Ooh, I love that question. Courtney?
Yeah, I think so coming to our informational webinar in a few weeks is a good way to plug in and learn a little bit more. I think for us, our big ask is, to start talking about this, start talking about the challenges that wildlife are facing, the extreme changes to our landscape that have occurred, and that it's our responsibility to correct or at least mitigate to some degree. And that we, this is our job to be stewards of the land and of these wildlife. So just starting to do some of that, like public engagement and public outreach, talk to your neighbors about these issues and how we can solve them.
Great answer. Others want to respond?
I'll start, and Leslie or Brent, feel free to chime in or interrupt. But it's kind of similar to the answer to the last question, but we really are eager to connect with folks. And so if you think there's someone or you have some interest or tangential connection in what we're working on, we're just really eager to connect. We really value kind of all the different perspectives that might be able to help kind of steer and inform where we are in the direction of this endeavor. And there's a lot of funds to raise. There's a lot of hiring to do. There's a lot of work to do. So how people can plug into different pieces of that probably just depends on who you are and what you know about where you come from. But very, very eager to have folks reach out or sign up for our newsletter to keep tabs and wait for the right moment to reach out. And we're very open to conversations.
Thank you. One thing I heard Leslie say earlier, and this wasn't specifically in reference to you individuals, but that the people working at the agencies are people just like us. And I think sometimes the way I enter an opportunity to learn more is like calling and asking to have coffee, and that's it. Or, just like starting a conversation and finding out where there's mutual interest. I really like coffee. Maybe it's tea or something else, but just talking. Beth in the chat asked, and quote, on the topic of timelines, we only have a few weeks left for the November election. And to help get Prop 4 passed, what can we do right now to activate our community and spread the word about Prop 4? I can certainly answer that question. In the chat, there is a resource that Annie put, and there are a number, well, I think one of the really common ways I'm seeing, and Annie, you feel free to add to this, but anything you can post about Prop 4 on social media, particularly recorded videos, are very welcome right now. I hear there's something happening in the Bay Area on October 17th, but I'm not exactly sure of the details yet. So if we have anything to add, maybe Annie can chime in on that when she comes back on stage. And then the resource, Together Bay Area's resource hub has more information about what we can do. I really want to ask a lot more questions, but I'm going to have two more. So Courtney, Leslie, and Yair, where's your favorite place to go outside in the Central Bay?
So I have the luxury of living in between the Iron Horse Trail and also Walnut Creek. So for me, just being able to like walk out of my door and be in some version of nature is such a gift. And I think Annie was talking about this earlier, just how nice it is to be able to, you know, drive even 10 or 15 minutes and be surrounded in nature. And that's just such a gift of the Bay Area. So yeah, for me, it's just being able to walk outside with my kids and show them at least a little bit of nature. So
Awesome. Leslie or Yair?
All right, I'll go next. I'm gonna buck the obvious park choices, I think, and pick Mountain View Cemetery in Oakland. I have lived near there for going on 15 years, and I've probably walked around that place more than any other open space in the East Bay, and the views of the bay are spectacular, and there's so much history visible in writing everywhere you turn.
Huh. I think I'm going to have to put that on my list. That sounds really interesting. Thank you. All right, last up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to put a little plug. Leslie's background is the land that we're working on in Port Costa, and it is very beautiful and very complicated, as you heard. So it sort of has that. But I think my real personal favorite is Indian Rock Park and Mortar Rock Park in the Berkeley Hills. I grew up in Oakland and learned to climb there, and still climb there very frequently. And it's a very unique place where you can have a very, very myopic, intimate, direct connection with this sort of piece of nature that's been preserved there, you know, in a very physical way. And at the same time, you know, the views that are sort of offered when you go up above, you sort of sit up there and you can like kind of squint and just see all the greenery in the Bay Area and like imagine what it was like there before. And of course, you know, Mortar Rock Park is called Mortar Rock Park because there are mortars there. And so it's just this place where you feel a very personal sense of connection, both to your own engagement with, you know, these rocks and sort of the dance that some of us do with those, the region as a whole, and then the very real history and continuation of how people have interacted and lived in these spaces over time. So I think that's probably my favorite place.
Awesome. Together Bay Area may or may not have a map of some of the favorite places that people mention to visit. So thank you all for sharing. I'm going to give you one last word to round out the questions and then turn it back over to Annie, but maybe in 3 words or approximately 3 words. What is something that is giving you hope? You can take a breath on that and feel free to use 5 words if you need more.
I would say Courtney's project is giving me hope.
Awesome. Anybody else want to go?
yeah, and I mean, the field semester is giving us hope. I like that we have, you know, lots of problems and lots of people are trying to solve them together. That was much more than 5 words. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'll stay on the theme, which is the collaboration, like all of us not doing things in isolation, but that there's so many people not only doing good work, but trying to sync up on it.
Okay, amazing. I think I can take the afternoon off. We are stronger together. And on that note, thank you all so much for being here on your lunch break and sharing about your amazing projects. And I am going to turn it over to my friend league and the executive director of Together Bay Area, Annie Burke.
Thank you so much, Jess. And everyone, thank you so much for being here. And please join me in thanking Courtney, Yair, Brent, and Leslie for sharing their work. You can say something in the chat or react however you can in Zoom or in real life. But thank you so much for sharing some part of you and the work that you're doing with us today. There's a lot of hope to have in the world. Not if you read the news necessarily or spend too much time on social media, but if you spend more time with people doing really important work like the folks that we heard from today, there's a lot of good reasons. There are thousands and thousands of people working around the Bay Area, and of course, many more beyond the Bay Area, working for Healthy Lands and the projects that we heard about today. The more you know about what's happening on the ground, I think there's more reasons to have hope. And Prop 4 will be a major investment in this kind of work. It's money worth spending now because the costs and reacting to and responding to the things that climate change is bringing to us is only going to go up. The costs are only going to go up. So the importance of doing the kind of work that you've heard about today now is just so high. So we encourage you to vote yes on Prop 4, if that's not clear by now. And we also encourage you to encourage your friends and family and neighbors and colleagues, classmates to vote yes on Prop 4 also. And one way that you can help do that is by sharing the recording of this video. You can share the link to the Prop 4, Yes on Prop 4 campaign website. You can post to social media. You can send emails. I sent an email to my neighborhood group the other day just saying, hi, I work in this field and this is something I know a little bit about. Would really encourage you all to vote yes on Prop 4. And you all can do that in whatever version or language that works for you. And we also invite you to invite your friends and networks and colleagues to join us next week for our third and final version of this same showcase. Next Tuesday, the 22nd, we'll be heading down to the South Bay. So we'll hear from organizations in the South Bay who are working on similar or different versions of similar kinds of projects down there. And we invite you to come back and get inspired and learn more and stay connected. So thank you all so much for coming today. Thank you for caring about this place that we call home. We're so glad that you're here, and we hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you.